Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. We're heading into some really hidden corners of, well, human history and consciousness today. We're not just scratching the surface here, we're plunging into some truly mind-bending stuff. Ancient mysteries, lost civilizations, humanity's almost forgotten past. Think primordial consciousness, the surprising origins of what we call evil, actual giants, and even the story of a lost inner eye. It's quite a journey. For this deep dive, we're unpacking some fascinating, pretty esoteric material. Excerpts from Atlantean Fall, Pride, Giants, and the Third Eye. This draws heavily from H.P. Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, Anthropogenesis, focusing specifically on Stanza 10. Our mission really is to navigate these ancient verses, explore the profound moral, spiritual, and even physiological changes that supposedly defined the later third and early fourth races, the Atlanteans. Now, just to clarify for everyone listening, when these sources talk about races like Lemurians, Atlanteans, they don't mean modern ethnic groups, do they? It's more about these huge, sweeping stages of human evolution and consciousness in this particular doctrine.
Exactly. Yeah, I think vast phases of development over millions of years, not modern racial categories at all. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how this material just challenges so many conventional ideas about our past. It digs into these deep questions, about hubris, evolution, the very nature of perception itself. It offers a really unique lens to view human history and maybe even our condition today.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. How do these sources describe humanity's first steps, specifically these early Lemurians and the first Lemuro-Atlanteans? They supposedly didn't have formal religion, like we think of it. What was their spiritual connection like?
Well, their primeval religion, it wasn't about dogma or, churches. It was this innate sense of oneness with the universal deity. They felt they were man-gods in spirit, like a direct extension of the divine, no dogma needed. They had this intimate connection with the bright gods of the elements, which are presented as these spiritual essences behind natural forces.
Yeah.
And they were literally, the text says, nursed and tended by the spiritual beings, the bright spirits or Dianes.
Dionis. What are those exactly in this context?
And think of them as highly evolved spiritual intelligences, almost like cosmic guides or architects, guardians perhaps. This period is described as the true golden age. Gods actually walked the earth, mixed with mortals, a time of real innocence, direct spiritual knowing.
Sounds idyllic, almost too good to be true. And predictably, it didn't last.
No, that innocence faded.
The sources mention a duality igniting, a struggle between spirit and physicality. What happened?
That's right. It's described as a struggle for life between the spiritual and the psychic, and between the psychic and the physical, a real internal conflict. The source even likens it to partaking of the fruit of the tree of wisdom, gaining knowledge but also separating from that initial unity. And this is where humanity began to divide. You had those who mastered their new physical bodies and minds. They became the sons of light. But then there were others who fell victim to their lower material natures. They became slaves of matter.
Slaves of matter.
And these, the text suggests, became the seed for the later Atlantean sorcerers, that lineage of misused power.
Okay, this brings us to a really radical claim about evil. It suggests it's not some external force, but something human-made. And this is where it gets, well, very thought-provoking. The Shloka state, then the third and fourth races, became tall with pride. We are the kings. We are the gods.
That sounds like the birth of hubris, right? A huge shift.
It absolutely is. That burgeoning pride is tied directly to the Atlanteans. They're called the first anthropomorphists, meaning they started to worship form and matter, specifically
Themselves, their own bodies.
exactly, their own physical forms, their own powers. It quickly turned into outright self-worship. And from there, their religion apparently degenerated into phallicism, the veneration of generative powers. The source actually claims this remains a hidden foundation in the symbolism of many external religions even today.
Symbolically, there was also this shift. Focus moved from the North Pole, representing heaven, spirit, down to the Southern Pole, which is depicted as the pit, the source of hot material passions. This whole symbolic geography shift is said to have given rise to the concepts of good and bad sons of God and, good and bad magicians or sorcerers.
So if humanity started worshiping itself, its physicality, what does this imply about the origin of evil? The sources claim man himself is the separator of the one unity into the contrasted aspects of manifested life. That's a heavy statement.
It's the core insight, really. This material argues that the whole concept of a demon pride, lust, rebellion, it just didn't exist before physical, conscious humans appeared. The esoteric history of fallen angels essentially says it's us, humanity. We begot and nurtured this fiend in our own hearts.
So we created our own demons.
In a manner of speaking, yes. That Kabbalistic saying, demon est Deo versus the devil is God inverted, it finds its real application in humanity, according to this view. We're the ones who make that split from unity through our choices, our descent into materiality.
That really sets a stark stage for what comes next, because the sources introduce something quite disturbing. It's called a profound sin in this doctrine. The Atlanteans took wives fair to look at, wives from the mindless, the narrow-headed. They bred monsters, wicked demons, male and female. What's going on here?
Yes, it's presented as a very serious transgression, not just a mistake. The sin of this third race.
Yeah.
It wasn't really about gaining knowledge, like in some myths. It was about misusing their generative powers.
How so?
Doing so before consciousness was fully awake in them, before they grasped the spiritual consequences. And these mindless, narrow-headed, the text explains they were descendants of earlier third race groups left destitute of knowledge. They hadn't developed full human intellect yet.
So less evolved humans.
In a sense. The commentary describes them as having a human shape, but maybe hairy lower limbs. Some see a hint of sadder legends there. The wives taken by the Atlanteans from this group are called Kado, or Dakini, beings in human form, but very primal, driven by instinct with little developed mind.
And this leads us to giants. I mean, giant myths are everywhere, right? Every culture seems to have them. Does this esoteric doctrine treat them as actual history?
It does, yes, quite firmly. The Secret Doctrine affirms their reality and, interestingly, offers several lines of evidence.
Like what?
Well, geologically, it points to older human skeletons being larger, more powerful, cites authorities like Lartet who linked tall stature to pre-flood races. Then there's classical testimony. Ancient writers like Philostratus, Pliny, Plutarch, Pausanias, they all wrote about seeing or knowing of giant skeletal remains.
Yeah.
Some incredibly large, 12, 22 cubits, even more.
That's enormous.
It is. Archaeologically, it mentions finds like the Abbe pegs discovering enormous skulls under huge stones near Thera's volcanoes, implying immense strength was needed. Plus, you have Cyclopean remnants, these massive ancient stone structures found worldwide, often linked to giants in local lore.
Right, like Stonehenge or similar places.
Exactly. Even ancient Chinese annals, like the Shu King, mentioned the Mao Tse, described as an antediluvian and perverted race of giants. And it draws a direct line between the Rakshasas of Lanka, those powerful beings from the Ramayana, and the historical Atlanteans, suggesting that race needed superhuman physical power just to survive against the giant monsters of that era.
That's quite a collection of claims. Okay, now for something even more controversial, I imagine. The abominable crime that this doctrine says led to the origin of apes. This must clash heavily with modern science.
Oh, absolutely. It's a major point of contention, and the source acknowledges the challenge. The esoteric claim is this. Later Lemurians and early Atlanteans, following that sin we discussed, they bred with certain animals. Not modern animals, mind you, but distinct, now unknown species from that time.
An unnatural union.
Considered abominable, yes.
Yeah.
And this union supposedly produced a unique ape-like species, now extinct, from which modern anthropoids apes are descended.
Interspecies breeding. Modern biology generally rules that out, right? Especially producing fertile offspring.
It does. The source anticipates this objection. It clarifies that both the Atlantean men and these animals were anatomically different back then. The boundaries weren't necessarily the same. It even gives examples like fertile hybrids from hare-rabbit crosses or wolf-dog progeny, suggesting maybe the rules were different in those primordial times. It frames these as prima facie deductions, rather than absolute law.
Okay, so what are the key points of this doctrine on apes, then?
Right, there are three main claims. First, man was the first and highest mammal in this fourth round of evolution, a round being a huge cosmic cycle.
So man came before apes in this view?
Exactly. Second, the ape is man's descendant, not ancestor, the product of that unnatural crossbreed human sire, unknown animal down. And third, a really striking claim. Human childbirth is difficult and dangerous precisely because of this ancient act of bestiality. Animal procreation, it says, is comparatively painless because they followed nature's intended path.
That's a very specific explanation for childbirth pain.
It is, and it adds another layer. Apes are apparently millions of years younger than speaking human beings.
Really?
And the egos, the individual consciousnesses incarnating in apes, there are supposedly entities who had already reached the human stage in a previous round.
Meaning former humans.
Souls that were once human, yes, but are now karmically forced into ape forms due to past actions. It's a heavy concept.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift focus slightly. The shlokas mentioned something that sounds purely mythical. Then the third eye acted no longer. What exactly was this third eye, according to these texts, and what happened to it?
Well, surprisingly, it's described as a literal physical organ in early humanity, not just symbolic. And what's interesting is that modern science offers some, let's say, potential echoes.
How so?
Many lower vertebrates, like the Hatteria lizard in New Zealand, still have a rudimentary third eye structure, though it's non-functional now. Paleontologists even believe that in extinct creatures like the labyrinthodon, this eye was a working organ of vision.
Okay. And in humans?
In humans, the witness to this lost organ is identified as the pineal gland, deep in the brain. The commentary puts it quite poetically. The third eye, likewise getting gradually petrified, soon disappeared. The double-faced became the one-faced, and the eye was drawn deep into the head and is now buried under the hair.
Petrified. Like it turned to stone.
Functionally petrified, yes.
Yeah.
Atrophied. And anatomically, the pineal gland develops from the same part of the embryonic brain as our two regular eyes, suggesting a shared origin. It's interesting, Descartes actually intuited the pineal gland was the seat of the soul, which is closer to this esoteric idea than much modern thought.
So if it was a real organ, what did its loss, its petrification, mean spiritually? What function was lost?
It signifies a huge shift in human consciousness. The third eye was active back when the spiritual element was dominant, when humanity lived in that more unified spiritual state. As humanity descended into materiality, as our physical senses, sight, touch, taste, smell, hearing, became stronger and more dominant, this spiritual eye began to fade, atrophy.
So it was a different kind of seeing.
Completely. Those early, more ethereal humans, the four-armed and three-eyed races mentioned, they supposedly used it as their main way of perceiving. It allowed them to see, both before and behind, embracing eternity, meaning they had this inner intuitive perception that wasn't limited by physical space or time.
But it didn't vanish completely at first.
Apparently not. By the middle of the fourth race, the Atlanteans, this inner vision needed artificial stimuli to reawaken it. Things like initiation rituals, occult training. But its natural functions died out almost entirely as humanity sank deeper into physical sin and materiality, especially before Atlantis finally sank.
This raises a pretty direct question then. Is there a link between physiological purity, maybe lifestyle choices, and spiritual sight? Or reawakening this inner vision?
Yes, the source makes that connection very explicitly. It states that the greatest impediment to the development of yoga powers, or any higher spiritual abilities, is the activity of the physiological senses, especially sexual action.
Why specifically that?
Because that activity is seen as closely tied to the spinal cord and the brain. The medulla oblongata's activity is said to strongly influence the pineal gland. So the teaching is that when chastity is practiced, that vital energy, sometimes called prana or chi, is conserved and can be redirected upwards. This redirection can help reawaken the deva eye, the third eye. It really emphasizes how interconnected our physical, mental, and spiritual states are.
Okay, let's tie this all together with karma. The source says this whole period, this descent, generated our heaviest karmic debt. What does that mean for us now, today?
This is really key to understanding the why behind human suffering and our current situation, according to this doctrine. The sin, as it's called, wasn't just using physical powers. It was misusing them, making the tabernacle of the indwelling God a fane of every spiritual iniquity, turning the sacred profane, essentially. The text suggests karma is maybe a better word than sin here, because the spirit, the monad, that divine spark within each of us, was still technically the master. So it was the spirit itself that, in a way, sinned by giving into the temptations of its new physical form.
And this created a debt.
A massive karmic debt generated during this third and fourth race period, one that our current fifth race is still supposedly working through. It helps explain, in this view, why many of us are now living through the effects of causes produced in our Atlantean bodies.
So reincarnation is central here.
Absolutely. The idea that the same monads who inhabited those giant forms are now amongst us, perhaps as ourselves, that's the only way, this doctrine argues, to reconcile the apparent injustices of life.
The inequalities we see.
Exactly. Inequalities of birth, fortune, ability. Karma isn't presented as punishment or fate, but as the absolute and eternal law of harmony and equilibrium. Simply put, man creates causes, the law simply adjusts the effects. We are, in a very real sense, experiencing the consequences of actions set in motion long, long ago.
Wow. What an absolutely extraordinary journey we've taken today. Through this, well, hidden history of humanity,
Yeah.
from that initial spiritual oneness down through the rise of pride, the strange interbreeding with mindless beings, the idea of actual giants, the really surprising origins proposed for apes, and the loss of that inner third eye. It's a lot to process. Definitely challenges the standard narrative.
It really does. And if you connect it all, this esoteric history paints a compelling, if completely unconventional, picture of human evolution. It suggests that our struggles today, our deepest urges, maybe even aspects of our physical bodies, could be echoes of choices made by our collective consciousness ages ago. It really pushes us to reconsider what we think we know about where we came from, and maybe where we could be going, our potential.
And perhaps for you listening right now, this deep dive leaves us with a powerful thought, maybe a humbling one. If this idea holds true, that the demon of pride, lust, and rebellion truly had no existence before the appearance of physical conscious man, and that humanity itself begot and nurtured this fiend in his own heart, what does that really say about the nature of what we call evil? And more importantly, what does it say about our own inherent capacity, not just to create it, but maybe, just maybe, to ultimately overcome it from within? Thank you for diving deep with us into these profound mysteries. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.